All right. And so this video is the follow-up to the annotation stage. And this is not something that I have done before. This is a new system that I want to lean into this year. I'll talk a little bit about the why with the next slide. But essentially, we're going to call this the WHS, or the what, how, so response. And it's what I want students to be able to do in writing, hopefully to then lead into discussion. And because so often I've found sometimes the annotations aren't enough, or the annotations aren't the right activity for what we're doing, especially with longer text that we're reading. So anyhow, I'm going to talk through this, and hopefully some other people might try it out this year. I'm going to be kind of giving updates about how this works, but I'm really hopeful that this addresses a need in our classroom that I've observed, especially in recent years. So another, again, staying with our octopus analogy, octopuses have three hearts. So this idea of three different stages in this writing, because the key thing I want students to have in my classroom is that when they read a text, especially a difficult text, that they don't shut down, but they have something to say about it. And I think oftentimes, like, that's a skill that translates even beyond our literary analysis of like poems and stories. Do they have the critical thinking and resilience to do the work and invest in finding their own interpretation and the confidence to share it? I think this might be something that helps build a foundation for that. So the first step is just what happened, and really asking them to paraphrase in their own words. What did they just read? And I actually think this is where I have done a poor job as a teacher in creating time and space for this, because it's really easy if you just do the annotations to not step back and say, oh, what actually happened in what I read? It doesn't have to be long. I do think going beyond just one sentence, and I'm going to come back to the rule of three with this, matters, but making sure that they have some sort of summary is the first step. And I'm going to have them do this a lot, handwritten in their spiral notebooks. I'm going to share later on a picture of this, but like I did one of these as I went with a book that I'm reading this summer to try it out. I think that tangible nature of writing this down does matter. And I'm going to try to make sure that they show kind of some like evidence of their understanding by paraphrasing more often in our course. From there, a stage that, I teach AP literature for half my section. So this might kind of shift towards that literary element technique, but it doesn't have to. And I'll talk through that later on in this video. But what were choices or things that you noticed? And I will say, if they've done the annotations already, they can use their annotations for this middle step. Also, some evidence might be a good job to practice their evidence in their writing. And then this last step, so what? So why does this matter? What's interesting? What's the big idea? Is there like a theme or a message? How does this contribute? Or just like, what do you think about this? And making students write that down so that they're then equipped to share their understandings, because sometimes they don't have this. They do the annotations, but they don't have that so. And I'm asking them to kind of do the work of this. I really anticipate this in our classroom. When we use this, it won't be all the time because it's a lot of writing if you have them do the full steps. Is I would see this as, hey, you do your reading, you do your prep work, and then we go to a formal discussion, maybe a seminar where you need to do this first before we go into the seminar to really make sure that's as meaningful of an experience for everyone involved. I also think the muscles of this will pay off for later types of writing in our classroom. So I think I see value there. Let's talk through it. So the first one is like a what. I'm going to use that same story sticks. I'm going to use one paragraph, the second paragraph. So if I was doing the what for the second paragraph, and I think the more narrow you have students do this, the better. So the second paragraph begins, blah, 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 blah. One of the things I'm going to, especially my upper level classes, I'm going to challenge them to use some weaving of textual evidence with specific words or phrases, and to build the muscles of that type of writing as well with textual evidence. But really, hey, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then I'm also going to try to emphasize transitions and shifts, because that's a skill that will benefit them in their literary analysis going forward. Secondly, we're going to move into the how. I'm going to edit the slide so that says how at the top. But the how being, what were choices that they noticed? And I know I teach AP literature, so I'm biased towards like elements and techniques some of the times, but I'm going to show you on the next slide, it's not just that. And then I definitely want them using textual evidence as much as possible, and then thinking about, if they can, these are two different things I noticed, and how they tie together. So like the higher level version of this, this and this ties together. That's a little bit of work, but I think it will pay off down the road. So some examples of how Marissa Thompson, when I talked to her about this system, she used the phrase "the choice." The author chose to, instead of just like "this happened." Like if it's if it's fiction, everything's a choice. Talk about why those choices matter. So that lens I've found helpful, but here are some specific things. And I will practice doing these in class with students to model anything about characterization, including the speaker, by the way, with poems like, hey, I learned this, I learned this. The author chose to have the characters say this or do this. So that's an easy one. Another thing is anytime there's a shift, talking about like why that shift, whether tone, mood, or otherwise, anything that's repeated, either in the text or a recall from earlier, maybe a motif. Also, important words or phrases, just like the use of this word. We do a lot of connotation diction work in our class. Of course, figurative language, though I don't want that to be the only thing my students look for. And then juxtapositions, one of my personal favorite words, comparisons or contrast. Oh, this is put next to this character next to this character. And I really think you have to model this. This is on me as a teacher to model what this looks like. We will do a lot of modeling first. I will probably have like a follow-up video that I attach at some point to this slide to give some more support. And then we go back to like, this is what it would look like in terms of writing. I, especially as a teacher who has students write literary analysis, a lot of times they'll do the annotations and then they don't know what to write. And that makes me think, hey, we have to do one more step of accountability. And this idea of writing down at least one thing they noticed and why it matters as a regular practice in our classroom, that's something I want to get better at as a teacher. I think this system will help. And then finally, the so what. And again, I'm going to fix that top slide. I'm noticing that now. And why does this matter? Now, theme is an easy way to go in terms of what's the big idea word. So maybe in the terms of like trauma, but then what is it saying about that word to make it a full, complete thought? So what is the story's message about trauma or inherited generational trauma with the story sticks? But also just like, this is where your voice should show up. This is where you're like, hey, I think this matters. I think this actually connects to my own life or this connects to today's moment. That's fine in this space too. I want students to have those personal connections and reactions, and the level of formality I think can kind of go out the door a little bit, especially in this current moment where the generic professional academic tone is something that ChatGPT can spit out. Voice is going to have even more value, I would argue. So some examples of what this looks like. This is a poem that I did in part of our July poem collaborative reading online. And I had done the annotations already personally. So I'm like, okay, let me try out this system. What, how, so. Here, this happens in this stanza, this stanza, this stanza. So with a poem, I just kind of summarize each stanza. The how, I noticed a shift. And then I talked about a positive connotation with that shift. Again, little AP Lit style here. And then finally, just my personal reaction. Hey, this is definitely an out there poem, but I do find some hope in it. Here's why. And writing that out. And again, this didn't take very long. I know I'm typing this one, but it wasn't this like hour-long thing. You've done the work of reading it. Take an extra 5-10 minutes to write out your thoughts on this, maybe a little bit longer than that, but this isn't like a full essay type style writing. And then I also have the example of, I'm reading Jane Eyre this summer. I'm almost done right now as I record this video, but I just stopped at the end of the chapter, picked 3 pages, like the last 3 pages of chapter 20. And I just wrote down what happened. I wrote down something like a contradiction I noticed where like the character said something that kind of didn't track, and there's a pattern of this. And then I wrote about my own take about how that showed how this character might be a little bit shady or duplicitous, and what it's saying about power in the face of love in the context of this novel. So I did this. This took me about 8-9 minutes to do. So this would be a practice that I might have when we're doing a longer novel. Hey, here are the pages I want you to do a WHS for in our classroom. Again, this is new. I'm just imagining what it could look like. Again, the big 3: paraphrase, choice, idea. I think you could also do a mini one of these where it's like one sentence, especially in class. So I might try that out a little bit, especially with my sophomores. And then it doesn't have to be perfect. But at the same time, you don't need to do it every time or else it's going to burn out. But it is a tool in my tool belt as a teacher that I'd like to use. And I do think that there are some deeper reasons that I will kind of articulate in writing in this post. This is an experiment. I wanted to share that experiment, and I will update folks about how it goes as we go ahead this year.